with a somewhat cute debate rhyme, which is no new in the two. And I'd just like to simply point out that the affirmative team, I'd like you to hold them to their responses on the flow in the next speech. They can continue the repetition, but I would ask you to hold them to the responses because the negative team will not be heard from again today's debate round. With that, let's get into the first voter. Now, voter number one is that of dropped arguments. Now, they completely dropped some important arguments, and there were 3 points under this argument, and this argument really killed their entire case. My argument specifically, I said, I'm going to take their harms and advantages, and I'm going to respond to all of them. Now, I had 3 points under this. First, I had the point of false comparison, that they were comparing a world of no regulations to a world with regulations, that their harms and advantages depended upon that. They dropped that point. The second point I had under this was that other pollutants, that we have other pollutants to look at under the Clean Air Act that could have had this effect on our economy and our businesses. As you see, they haven't. Our economy has been continued to be one of the global leading economies. We've allowed it to grow under the Clean Air Act, so the point is empirically proven that it's false under their harms and advantages. They can't claim that solvency. They completely dropped that. My third point, which was extremely important, that they completely dropped, was of pollution controls, that the Clean Air Act uses pollution controls. And so we have companies, sure, that they'll have to be regulated, they'll have to decrease their CO2, but that doesn't mean by decreasing productivity, that means by using pollution control. All 3 of those points take out the affirmative team case, and I ask you to flow that to the negative team. Really the significance of a dropped argument in a debate round is that it can't be picked back up by the team, and it is completely conceded. Now moving on to my second voter, and that is of vagueness. Now, basically, the affirmative team has a burden of proof. Now, what's the problem with it? They really have violated our ground. Now, their response in their last speech was that they can give us a world. They can give us a world that there won't be regulations through the Clean Air Act. Now, I have a simple response to this. It's won't versus will. The job of the affirmative team is to show you what will happen. If something will happen, we can give you arguments about why what will happen is bad. All they are saying is they can show you they can take away, they're mandating one thing won't happen. They are taking absolutely no stance on what will happen. And as you've seen with our arguments, they've been able to shift around on this issue and say what will and won't happen. Both teams are predicting that when it's the affirmative team's job to predict and tell us what will happen so we have something to run disadvantages on, so we have a status quo to defend. We've been confused whether we've had to bring up examples of what will happen because we've been put in the shoes of the affirmative team. We've had to be affirmative and negative. We've had to show you what will happen after their plan and why that would be bad. So again, on that voter alone, that the affirmative team has not shown you what will happen, only one part that won't, and that violates negative ground, that leaves us really with nothing, I ask you to vote negative. Now, moving on to the third voter, that is of evidence. First of all, their only response was basically, again, talking about how the Clean Air Act was, it's all the same. Now, they completely, first of all, this is not unreasonable. Now, that's my first response. Even if that's true, why can't they give us evidence from 2010? Why can't they give us recent evidence? My second response is they completely dropped my issue. They completely dropped my issue, which was that of it being a tool. Now, this tool varies, and it's completely different, and the EPA can decide what to do with it. Now, my third point here is case shift. I ask you to hold them to their position from the first cross-examination. We tried to pin them down on something. They said it was decided how the Clean Air Act would be used in 2010. I ask you to hold them to their own words on that. So they should be able to give us evidence on that specific decision of what that would be. So the predictions all before 2010, all before it was finalized, what the effect would be, are false and cannot be considered in today's debate round. Now, the next voter is that of state. My first point here is they've given you no evidence that the state cannot do this, and we've given you evidence that the states not only can, but they will. Second of all, they completely dropped the impact. The state regulations are 30,000 times more restricted. That is completely dropped, completely unaddressed. So you are literally voting for it. You can take all of their harms and advantages, multiply them 30,000% more, and then that's a reason to vote affirmative on their own harms and advantages. The last voter is that of health. The Clean Air Act has been proven to work. To say that it was not meant for GHG, how did the Clean Air Act know what it was meant for? We can't predict what will be a pollutant.